I've found the greatest storytelling ever done with data, but it takes a strong stomach to digest the lessons of the Fallen.io data documentary. Welcome, friends and foes, to another Data Devotional. This week we're going to cover the greatest data storytelling that I've come across to date, the Fallen.io data documentary. For those who are new, I'm Luciano Pesci, the CEO and founder of Emperitas. We're a customer journey intelligence services company, and Nexum. We are a data ecosystem solution for SMBs to connect their data to insights. The problem that we're going to tackle in this devotional is storytelling with data. It is something that is very, very hard to pull off. The reason I'm featuring Fallen.io is because it is such a successful example. So we'll dissect what makes it so effective as a data storytelling device. Telling stories in general is difficult. Telling them with data is very hard. It requires a successful mix. You can see the link here in the bottom left to an article that outlines 3 components: data, narrative, and visuals. I agree with this categorization, that the data, the narrative, and the visuals are distinct components, and that it requires mixing them effectively. If you have too much of one and not enough of the other, it's not effective. But I would add to this list the performance itself. Usually this is done in person. You might be doing it over a Zoom, but it's live. There is a performative nature to the data storytelling. This is especially true with the Fallen.io. The word history has its roots in the word story. Teaching history is even harder than data because historical data, things like dates and deaths, are usually unmemorable. Most people do not put those in a bank where they can retrieve them easily. There's just no connection to the real world. One modern exception to this is epic rap battles of history. I've linked to a previous presentation that I gave to the Digital Marketing Collective, now known as the Utah DMC, in 2016. But in that, I cover epic rap battles of history and storytelling with data. They were able to teach history in a way that people remember the facts. Now combine teaching history with data, and you have something that is doubly difficult, which is another reason why the Fallen.io is such a successful example. So let's get into the data doc itself. This is a good point if you haven't seen the documentary to pause. Go watch it. I've linked to it multiple places in this deck, but you can just go to fallen.io. Just watch the video. You don't need to do the interactive version, which they do offer. But the video is about 18 minutes long, and what follows will make a lot more sense if you have consumed that before you proceed. Let's connect the data and the storytelling for Fallen.io. Here's a quote from the website. The Fallen of World War II is an interactive documentary that examines the human cost of the Second World War and the decline in battle deaths in the years since the war. The 15-minute data visualization uses cinematic storytelling techniques to provide viewers with a fresh and dramatic perspective of a pivotal moment in history. The parts that I've highlighted in red here are the core parts of the story. This is laid out very early in the documentary. It's laid out in all of the literature surrounding the documentary. It's reinforced in the documentary itself. It is the main point of the story, the human cost of the Second World War. The creator is Neil Halloran. On the website, here's a quote from him. It was written, directed, coded, and narrated all by him. That is a unique mix of skills, by the way, to find someone who has the artistic creativity of Neil and the ability to code this up in a way that's not just visually effective, but also quite creative. You can connect with Neil on LinkedIn. His profile link is provided there in the bottom left. But he states that he is, quote, passionate about data visualizations, documentary filmmaking, and telling emotional stories about numbers, people, and science. And he is still making films. His personal website's there linked as well. The Fallen has received critical success and popular success. So in addition to a long list of awards and recognitions, it's been utilized in Khan Academy courses, and even the armchair historians have cited it as an incredible example of telling the story of the human loss of World War II. So let's dissect the doc and figure out what makes it so effective according to those earlier categorizations: the data, the narrative, the visuals, and the performance. Neil built the data set that was used in the documentary, which had to have been a difficult task to do because it is not as though all of these numbers are readily available in one place. There's disputes about what these numbers even mean or the actual numbers themselves. For example, were Soviet military casualties 8 million or 14 million? Of the 27 million, that missing 6 could add a lot. So there was a lot of groundwork that Neil had to do to construct the data set that's used in this visualization. The data set is currently linked to on the website. However, the link leads to Google resources that have some kind of an error. I've messaged Neil about this. We'll see if he gets back to me. But in the past, that data set has been publicly available. The data has been structured for exploration. So here are some of the metrics. These are my approximations. I don't know that these are the actual metrics in the data set since I can't access it at the moment. But these are metrics that I can see must be present in order for the analysis that's done to exist. So there are deaths compared to other conflicts. So there's data sets about not just total deaths in World War II, but other world conflicts and atrocities. Civilians versus soldiers, that categorization is used throughout the entire presentation. Demographics, deaths versus casualties, the nationality, theater of conflict, battles, time, per capita, GDP, and conflict type. So while it was a difficult data set to construct, it has been structured in a way that will enable really profound analysis. What about the narrative? Well, the narrative uses the tell-them principle, which is one of the reasons that it's so effective. If you're unfamiliar with the tell-them principle, there's a link here in the bottom left. You can go read about it. You tell people what you're going to tell them, then you tell them what you've told them. The documentary successfully uses this as a way to set expectations and to lay a mnemonic path for people. It also chronologically builds to the big picture, which is interesting because you often want to present the big picture first and then dig down into the details. But for the purpose of this storytelling, it makes sense to start small and build to the big reveal, which is the human cost of World War II. The narrative is also chronological, which allows you to follow along very easily. And in the end, there's a note of optimism with his proposal of the long peace. What about the visuals? Often you may not even realize that you're looking at a visual. Two really good examples of this are the opening visual about the age of individuals alive prior to, during, and after World War II. Some of them are participants, others are just figures from the public. Another is the 1,000 deaths being represented by the person icon, and the way that that is used to then construct histograms and bar charts and other calculations to express the enormity of loss as a result of the conflict. Visuals are very simple, they're clear. The color coding reinforces what is being said. The distinctions between nationalities, flags are used to emphasize that point. Maps are also used. Everything is clearly labeled, and I liked the chalkboard theme. You may not even have noticed it in the first watch. Helps reinforce the subtle story that this is being taught to you in a classroom kind of setting. What about the fourth and final element, the performance? This is where the documentary is particularly effective because it subtly teaches you how to interpret data without showing you, in some cases, how to interpret the data. The opening scene with the age of the individuals involved is a really good example of this, because at no point are you told, here's a chart, here's what you're looking at, here's how to interpret it, but even down to the way in which the view of the camera, and I know there's no camera on this, it was digital, but the way that that zooms in and reinforces through the movement itself how to interpret the chart is very effective. And then finally, there is an added soundscape element. There are counters, there are marching boots, there's ominous wind. I'm thinking in particular of the point where they show the Soviet deaths and that chart just keeps racking bodies up and up and up and up. It's a very effective way to reinforce the performance. I'm not sure that you're going to get away with soundscaping your presentations in a boardroom or even on Zoom, but you won't know unless you try. You can get the soundtrack for Fallen.io on Bandcamp. The music and the sound was done by Andy Dollarson. So it's that successful mix of data, narrative, visuals, and performance that makes the Fallen.io the best data storytelling that I've ever seen. Keep your progress going by applying the lessons of the Fallen.io data documentary to your own work, and let me know in the comments what you'd like me to cover in future data devotionals. See you next week.